bubbling up over parts of eastern England, Lincolnshire down to Cambridgeshire. Chance of 1 or 2 showers here. Could even be the odd heavy one, but most areas staying dry. The main exception to that will be Northern Ireland, where cloud and rain will trickle in by lunchtime, and the west coast of Wales, likely to see some showery rain by the end of the afternoon. Same goes for Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. But elsewhere, generally, we'll hang on to some spells of sunshine. Warmer than today as well, 25, 26, maybe 27 in London. It'll be cooler further west with a thicker cloud and the rain. That will pep up a little during the evening time. Some heavier bursts getting into western Scotland. That moves towards Shetland for the start of Thursday. And on Thursday, across the south, there will be some more wet weather coming in. Could be some heavy bursts of rain mixed in with this. Some heavy showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland. In between, something a little bit drier. And generally, temperatures just dipping off a little bit by Thursday, back into the high teens or low 20s.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Big problems in Cumbria on the M6. If you're heading south, a lane shut on the entry slip road. A car's broken down at the Kendal exit, junction 37. Further south on the northbound carriageway, a lane is closed at junction 18, where the entry slip road also closed coming onto the A54, the Middlewich exit, of course, at the scene of a crash on that stretch. On the M16, Greater Manchester, 2 lanes out, anti-clockwise 11 to 10, Barton to the Trafford Centre following a crash. Really slow on the Surrey stretch of the M25, anti-clockwise after a lorry caught fire in the roadworks earlier on, just after Godson. It's queuing back to Reigate. In West London, the High Street at Halston still closed following an accident. On the M26 in Kent, the outside lanes blocked off eastbound Rootham to the M20 for emergency barrier repairs. And there are severe delays on the Elizabeth line out of London Paddington to Heathrow and Reading following a 40 train at Southall. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to win our Super Summer Giveaway. With your chance to win £30,000 cash, our biggest cash prize to date, which means you get to spend every single penny however you like. What plans would you make with an extra £30,000 cash in your bank account? Take your family on the ultimate holiday, buy that treat that's always seemed out of reach, or just put it in the bank for a later date. However you'd spend it, make sure you don't miss out. For another chance to win £30,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tomorrow from 6, the legends of breakfast television are back together. Eamon Holmes and Anne Diamond, only on GB News.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs & Co. Coming up tonight, we now know that the next Tory leader will be elected in November. You tell me, who should it be? And do you reckon the party should be taking that long to decide? Your thoughts? Also, it's been announced today that the Bibby Stockholm is going to close in January. So what do you make to that then? Also, police chiefs have declared a national emergency. Get this, it's around the subject of violence against women and girls, levels of which have apparently reached epidemic levels. You tell me, what is to blame for this and how on earth do we fix it? I can tell you, people like Andrew Tate, they are coming under fire today. What do you make to that? Also, nearly 1,200 lawyers, celebrities and artists have written an open letter calling for an urgent meeting with the Attorney General to address the injustice, they say, of the 5 and 4 year sentences meted out for the Just Stop Oil folks. Your thoughts on that, please? Also, the era of digital IDs is soon to be upon us. Labour say it will make life easier. Critics say it is a massive state overreach. Your thoughts? All that and more before 7, but first, the 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thank you and good evening to you. Well, the latest from the GB newsroom tonight is coming to us from the United States, where President Joe Biden is due to address the nation from the Oval Office tomorrow to explain his plans for what he calls finishing the job. If you're watching on TV, you can see these live pictures of Air Force One in the state of Delaware, where Joe Biden has been at his holiday home by the beach. The president's understood to be returning to the White House today after several days out of the spotlight. It'd be interesting to see just how much we get to see of Joe Biden today, as Kamala Harris asserts herself as the presumed Democrat nominee to face the Republican Donald Trump. She's already secured the support of senior Democrats, including Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi and now Bill and Hillary Clinton. Her campaign raised over $80 million yesterday in just 24 hours, just after Joe Biden dropped out of the race for the White House. And staying in Washington, the head of the US Secret Service today resigned amid intense criticism of her handling of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. Kimberly Cheatle admitted that the attempt on Mr. Trump's life was, in her words, the most significant operational failure by the Secret Service for decades. And she said she had quit with a heavy heart. She'd been testifying before a congressional committee hearing yesterday, explaining her actions and saying she took full responsibility for what went wrong. News here at home now, and the Islamist preacher Anjem Chowdhury has been found guilty of directing a terrorist organisation. He now faces life in prison. His trial found that he directed the group known as Al-Muhajirun for a significant period starting in 2014. He was also found to have encouraged support at online meetings of the Islamic Thinkers Society. That's a New York-based Islamist group. Charlotte Dujardin, the dressage champion, has had to withdraw from the Olympics over a video that has resurfaced from 4 years ago, showing her making what she called an error of judgment during a coaching session. The three-time Olympic dressage champion has had to pull out of all competitions while the incident is being reinvestigated. She said what happened all those years ago was out of character, and she's sorry for her actions and devastated to have let everybody down now. A police officer was stabbed at a prison near Durham today. The officer is conscious and talking, and he's in hospital following the incident, which happened this morning at Frankland Prison. That's according to Durham Police. He was visiting the Category A men's prison from an outside force. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, said this afternoon she was appalled and that her thoughts were with the officer and his family. The government's to shut down a barge used for housing migrants off the south coast of England as part of an overhaul of the asylum system. Use of the Bibby Stock home, which can house up to 500 men, began under the Conservative government. But human rights campaigners compared it to a prison ship and criticised its use as inhumane. Extending the use of the Bibby Stock home would have cost more than £20 million next year. Water companies are expected to do far more to protect the health of Britain's waterways when new powers are given to the regulator. The government says the Environment Secretary will promise a crackdown on water firms that include tougher fines for polluting and making sure money is properly invested into water infrastructure rather than being paid out in bonuses for bosses. The Environment Agency reported 47 serious pollution incidents last year. That's up from 44 in 2022. Steve Reed says that's still unacceptable.
It would cost hundreds of billions of pounds to nationalise the water companies, and it would take years to unravel the current ownership models. I want to crack on and clean up the water as fast as we can. That is best done by giving the regulator the power, the teeth, to make water bosses responsible for illegal pollution face criminal charges for the law breaking for which they are responsible.
And just one last piece of entertainment news for you. The last remaining member of the Four Tops, whose music helped redefine the sound of Motown, has died at the age of 88. Abdul Fakir, who was often known as the Duke, was part of the quartet behind the string of hits throughout the 60s. In addition to I Can't Help Myself, which you just heard there, they also gave the world Reach Out, I'll Be There, and of course, Baby, I Need Your Loving, all of which became instant classics. Fellow musician Smokey Robinson has paid tribute to his friend, saying the Duke would carry on making music in heaven. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks for that, Polly, and thank you very much for placing the music of the Four Tops firmly at the forefront of my mind now, when I should be thinking about Bibi Stockholm and stuff like that. I can just hear myself singing Reach Out in my own mind. What, at home, you tell me, is your favourite song from the Four Tops? I often wonder as well, when you hear about some of these old bands and you look at some of the state of some of the music today and some of the lyrics, I wonder what these older musicians must think about. Is it just a sign of the times? Do they make music like they used to? Or what? You tell me. I am Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel. I've got a new face to the programme, former Conservative MP and the former Tory chairman, Sir Jake Berry, and alongside him, the columnist and author, Ella Whelan. Good evening to both of you. You're very welcome tonight. You know the drill, don't you? What's on your mind tonight? I bet it is just the Four Tops music now. We planted that seed in your mind. But anyway, lots I want to talk to you about tonight. You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. gbnews.com/yoursay is how you can talk to me and each other, and of course you can email gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can go to Twitter or X and you can reach me there at gbnews. But wherever you're watching or listening tonight, you're very welcome indeed. Now, there's been a lot of speculation, hasn't there, about who is going to be the new leader of the Conservative Party. What are the timeframes and so on and so forth? Well, now we seem to have a lot more clarity, because we know that we're going to be finding out the new leader by November. I think the 2nd of November is the exact date. Many people, Jake, are saying, what on earth is taking the Tories so long?
Well, as you say, Michelle, I was chairman of the Conservative Party. These things can be done quickly. When the Tory MPs, I was one of them, but I didn't do it, defenestrated Liz Truss, we could have had leadership in 3 or 4 days. In fact, I saw that as chairman. I think it's a disgrace, actually, that the members were excluded and Rishi Sunak was brought upon the Tory party by the MPs themselves. The Conservative Party to be about it. Is it immigration? Is it Europe? Is it about social issues? And to appoint a leader straight away, I think would just show absolute arrogance. That's why it's going so long, because there's going to be a long period where all of these candidates, they'll be narrowed down. They'll start about 8 or 9 of them as early as next week. They'll be narrowed down to 4 by the start of the summer long parliamentary holidays. Let's not forget Keir Starmer said he was going to get rid of those, but he hasn't, has he? And then those 4 candidates will go around the country and talk to Conservative members, but crucially as well, go out and talk to the British public and say, look, guys, we got it catastrophically wrong. Tell us where we went wrong. What do you want us to focus on? So personally, even though 3 months is a very long time, it's also, as well as the leadership election, it's a post-mortem of the election that we lost.
But hasn't people been telling you the things that you've been doing wrong for months on end now?
Well, they have. I'm just not sure that the leadership of the Conservative Party, as was under Rishi Sunak, now interim leader, were listening. And I think if someone wants to lead the Conservative Party in the future, they really need to be public completely attuned, if you like, with the views of the people who they're asking to vote for them.
Who do you think the next leader should be?
Well, I don't really know.
You must have a view.
Well, last time round I supported Tom Tugendhat. I'm not supporting anyone at the moment this time round, but I think Tom Tugendhat is someone who could both unite the party but give real leadership to the country. I think Kemi Badenoch is the one that people are betting on. She's the bookies' favourite. I think she's an exceptional communicator. James Cleverly, again, fantastic individual, a really good political communicator. And I wouldn't discount, I think the outside chance in this election is Dame Priti Patel. I think Priti stands quite a good chance. She's very popular with the membership. I think it could be any of them.
Well, some of you membership will be watching this programme tonight. What do you make to those timelines, and who would you like to see as the next leader? And what about this whole notion of what went so wrong then for the Tories? How would you surmise it, and what do you think they should be positioning themselves as going forward? Your thoughts? Ella, what do you think?
I don't think that a new leader is going to solve the deep existential crisis within the Conservative Party, which is that, you know, probably with the exception of Kemi Badenoch, most of the Conservatives, to my mind, and I'm not a Conservative, have forgotten what it means to be Conservative. I mean, it's clear as day what you got wrong in relation to not handling the immigration issue properly, you know, in any kind of adequate sense. You know, failing to address people's key concerns, whether it's housing or anything else. But I think the main thing that the Conservative Party got wrong when they were in government was squandering the 2019 Brexit moment. And it wasn't just a sort of flippant, superficial thing. It was a sense of, you know, a momentum had built from 2016 around the idea of democratic change. You know, the fact that so many more people had voted in that particular referendum than ever before. There was a sort of real potential there. And that was squandered throughout the COVID years. I think it could have been handled differently, but certainly there was no real Boris Johnson, in my mind, a little bit of a fake, but there was no real sort of kind of die-hard Democrat in the Conservatives that was going to realise that populist potential, and it sort of was always going to happen that way. You know, who will recapture that now in Parliament? I mean, we've had Nigel Farage making his maiden speech, probably one of the few MPs that gets the Brexit spirit in that kind of way. But just simply putting even someone that I might like on certain issues like Kemi Badenoch as the head won't address that existential crisis. I think, you know, with reform hot on your heels and everything else, the Tory party can't go back to some kind of golden age. It has to either change or split or move.
So I think you're right. I think so. The first thing is the general election, in all usual measures, is a very long time away. It will probably be 4, if not 5 years away. So there is quite a long time for the Conservative Party to try and reconnect. It completely lost touch with people who voted Conservative. Why did so many people vote Reform in the July the 4th election? Because the Reform Party stood on a Conservative manifesto. The Conservative Party didn't. And we've got to find a way to recapture those 5 million people who voted for Reform and bring them back into the Conservative family. It's not a given. Reform may keep them and build on them. If we don't do that as a political party and the right remains divided, you will effectively have a Labour government forever, or a left-wing government forever. I don't think that's what Britain wants. So it does seem to me, whoever the next leader of the party is, they need to find a way to heal the Conservative family, bring Reform voters, maybe even the Reform Party too, together with the Conservative Party and recapture that spirit, that buccaneering spirit of entrepreneurialism, a belief in Britain, patriotism that I think is missing from our current government.
But I transfer what you just said there quite arrogant. This notion that it's the Tories or essentially a left-wing government forever. You know, there's a whole sense, I mean, I can tell you now, so many of you are getting in touch on the website, you see it for yourself, getting in touch on email saying the Tories are an irrelevance now, it doesn't matter who your leader is. So I found this notion that you need to bring people back into your fold quite arrogant, because perhaps what needs to happen is some of you guys need to start leaving your fold and start looking to people like Reform as being the future.
Well, that's not quite what I said, because what I said is that we have to find a way to bring Reform voters and Conservative voters together, because if we don't, you will have a Labour or a Labour-like government.
Would you ever consider joining Reform?
Or, in the alternative, find a way to bring the two parties together.
Would you ever consider joining
Well, my
Reform?
personal view is that most Conservative members of Parliament and former members of Parliament have or should consider joining Reform, because the Reform Party is standing on a Conservative Party manifesto. My view, as someone who's been chairman of the Conservative Party, is actually the Conservative Party needs to reform rather than necessarily become Reform.
Well, tell me your thoughts about it at home. We've been speaking there about reform. Well, Nigel Farage, he delivered his maiden speech in Parliament today. Listen.
We will not stop the boats, even if we send a handful to Rwanda. We will not stop the boats by attempting to smash the criminal gangs. Whatever prison sentences or penalties are put upon them, there will always be people volunteering to make millions of euros a week. We will only stop this if we start deporting people that come illegally. Then they won't pay the smugglers. But we'll only do that by leaving the ECHR.
One of the things he was going on to suggest is perhaps having a referendum about that very question. He also was pointing out that in the King's speech, I think it was something, the word immigration only featured something like on two separate occasions. Now, speaking about immigration, it was a key issue for many of my viewers, Jake. Now, we found out today that the Bibby Stockholm, that's due to close now in January. This is part of the Labour Party's plans. They say that they're going to speed up the processing of these asylum seekers. Do you support that decision or not?
Closing the Bibby Stockholm barge?
Yeah.
No, absolutely not. There's two things about it. So Labour, of course, this week you can dress it up how you want. You can put smoke and mirrors around it. They have announced an amnesty for every single asylum seeker who's come here in the last 12 months. So that means 70 to 90,000 people will just be allowed to stay in the UK. That's the first thing. They've also
They would
abolished...
dispute it's an amnesty, obviously.
They can dispute it. If it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. We passed a law that said if you come to this country illegally, you're a criminal, you can't have asylum. They've said we'll reverse that. And if you look at the figures from the Home Office, about 90% of people who apply for asylum in the UK, it's far too high, they get it. It's an effective amnesty. There are no disincentives anymore. One of the final disincentives were, if you come to the country, we're not going to pay for you to be in a hotel. We're going to put you on the Bibby Stockholm barge, described by some people as a floating prison. Good. I hope it is like a floating prison. Or we're going to put you in a military camp today. The Labour Party has said they're going to close those two military camps, one which hadn't opened, and close the Bibby Stockholm bomb. I don't know what more they could do, Michelle, than roll out a red carpet. Let's not forget 15% of all the people who crossed the Channel illegally have come since Keir Starmer, this year, since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister. He's not even been in the job 3 weeks, and they're queuing up at the border.
Come off it. You can't say that a fellow that's only been in the job for about 2 seconds is somehow going to be able to implement plans. You guys couldn't even stop it for years.
Michelle, let me pick you up on that. Number one, he said he had a plan to immediately smash the gangs. We'll see. I've seen no evidence of it. But also, during the election campaign, both the Conservatives and, in fact, Reform said we were united on this. The migrants are queuing up in Calais, waiting for you to release all of these disincentives, the inability to claim asylum being put on the Bibby Stockholm barge. And guess what? We were right. That is why 15% have come over in just over a fortnight compared to the rest of the year.
Hello?
Jake, you've got to let go of the gimmicks. And the Bibby Stockholm, much like the Rwanda plan, was a gimmick. It wasn't the kind of substantial change that needs to happen in order to either fix the small boats issue or the wider conversation about immigration, illegal and otherwise. We know that now lots of people's issue with the numbers isn't just related to the small boats, but the much bigger picture. I think, to be fair to the Labour Party, number one, the Labour Party is not liberal on immigration. It just isn't. I think that there's far less clear blue water between the Conservatives and the Labour Party on immigration than people might like to make out. But the announcements here for, Dame Angela Eagle saying that they're committed to having a swift, firm and fair insurance of the rules, you might be cynical and say, yeah. But actually, we know that much of the failures behind processing asylum seekers or dealing with illegal immigration has been boiled down to simple paperwork. a simple sort of either people working as civil servants not doing the job properly, emails not being answered, and that leads to injustices where people who shouldn't be allowed to stay are for indefinite periods, but also people who should have had their claims processed and become living here normally are left on waiting lists for a very long time.
A lot of these people discard deliberately their identification documents as well, don't they?
And it's
which is very odd, given that you're apparently supposedly a genuine asylum seeker.
Well, there were plans under, even under Blair, I think as far back as that, there were plans to have a sort of simple, whether you call it a detention centre or anything else, a system in which there was an area or military camp marked off where it wouldn't be squalor, and we know there was the whole stuff about the Bibby Stockholm having not exactly great living conditions,
or something like
dentist, or something like Yarlswood, places like Yarlswood, which were hellholes, real hellholes, and it was good that they were shut down. But have a proper functioning, decent place where you would process people in a timely fashion. And it's not rocket science.
In a timely fashion.
It's
if
not
they
rocket
chucked all the documents away.
Well, how are you going to
do that?
It can't. Either we say that this is an issue that can be fixed, and governments put in the resources and the time to fix it. And look, I'm not an expert on dealing with the immigration system, but it strikes me as not impossible that you could find out whether someone has maliciously discarded them or simply lost them. I mean, that must be in the realms within someone's expertise, and just do it properly. I think that I want to give Labour a little bit of room to do something about this, because I don't think we should sit here moaning the whole time. It's an issue that people want fixed. They don't want to continue to moan about.
But surely what you've just said is they need a detention centre. That's what the military camps were going to be, and that's what they've scrapped today. So you can't say Labour are right to scrap the military camps, but we need a detention centre.
But you guys were the biggest fans of hotels to anyone else. I mean, you also can't make that claim.
But where are these 400 people going to go?
Well, hang on. There you go. $1 million question. Let's respond to that perhaps after the break, and also look at this massive new emergency, apparently, across our societies of violence against women and girls. What do you think is causing that, and how do we fix it? You tell me, and I'll see you in 2.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The sunny spell that many have experienced this week makes this the perfect time to seek inspiration for fresh, beautiful food to fit the weather. Hannah Harley-Young from Crazy Sexy Food joins me once again for the latest in our Taste of Britain series, and to go alongside the return of the glorious sunshine, she recommends tequila.
To be honest with you, it's more about my total love of tequila. It is my favourite drink. I have my favourite cocktail ready to be shaped for you in a second, which is obviously the margarita. But I think also I just love the sort of general story of tequila. Tequila, a bit like with champagne, can only be produced in the region of Tequila in Mexico. But I've actually brought for you, interestingly, a brand that is London-based. This was set up by Tom and Jack. They were drinking, I think, in sort of 2018, 2019, somewhere in South London, and realised that tequila could actually be quite enjoyable.
Do you know what it's made of?
It is. It's made from the blue agave plant. Now, 300 million of these plants are harvested every year. It takes between 8 to 12 years to harvest. Their tequila is made to be drank with tonic, which is not your usual accompaniment with tequila. Usually it's lime, it's a margarita. With a Blanco tequila, the idea is that the process is that once it's distilled, that is the end, it's bottled and it's sold. This is the Reposado. I haven't actually opened that, but if you do want to have a smell, you can open it. But the idea behind this is that it's been rested, so it's rested in oak barrels. I actually love people's behaviour behind tequila now. I think back in the day it had a little slightly bad rep that you'd drink cheap shots and maybe make some bad mistakes on a night out, whereas now we're actually starting to appreciate it and respect it.
GB News, the People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
It's true. You're not wrong. No one will be cancelled. Lovely.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tomorrow from 6, the legends of breakfast television are back together. Eamon Holmes and Anne Diamond, only on GB News.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Jake Berry and Ella Whelan remain alongside me. We were just asking the million-dollar question as I went into the break. Then, if you're going to close down the Bibby Stockholm, where should these people go? Jake, what was the answer? Did we come up with one in the break?
Well, they're just going to be put in hotels, and I think actually the last government, for all criticism, they closed a load of these hotels, including one where I live in Darwin and in Lancashire, and they're just going to reopen, aren't they?
I was reading a report, actually, and it was saying, I'll put it in front of me, that according to the National Audit Office, they reckon that in the financial year up to March 2024, £3.1 billion would have been spent on hotels. I mean, that is appalling. And then they go on to say they have these contracts, so the likes of companies like Serco and people like that, they've got contracts for 100,000 asylum seekers in government accommodation. And apparently, the last government haven't even collated any centralised records of where these people are, the statuses of them. These guys, Open Democracy, etc., they say that this is a systemic failure.
Look, I don't know the information you refer to. I mean, I think it's pretty clear for everyone to see that there were lots and lots of failures in the last government. Look, my view is really simple, is until we accept the fact, and I applaud what Nigel Farage said in the House of Commons today, and it was good to see him make his maiden speech. He waited a long time to do it. Until we accept the fact that there is no such thing as an asylum seeker from France, because they are not fleeing persecution in France, they are economic migrants, and we find a way to send them back to France, we will not crack this problem, and we will have people in these hotels getting benefits, living off the British state, living off the British taxpayer, and the public, I believe, is absolutely fed up with this.
Well, one of the viewers, Craig, says, Michelle, quite frankly, I imagine that any homeless person would be glad of a space on the Bibby Stockholm, but apparently it doesn't seem to be good enough for people who enter the country illegally. This whole notion about putting up our homeless people in places like the Bibby Stockholm and why we're not doing that, that is coming through thick and fast on the email. Celia says she finds it offensive when people describe the Bibby Stockholm as inhumane. She says it's warm, dry, 3 meals a day, buses liaison for them, healthcare, immediate access to healthcare, etc. They live better than some of the British population, she says. What do you make to that? Well, speaking of the British population, a new police report now estimates, get this, at least 1 in 12 women in England and Wales will be victim of violence every single year. Now, the reason this has hit the headlines today is because now National Police Chiefs Council have described this issue as, I quote, a national emergency. Also, coming in the line of fire, shall we say, is people like Andrew Tate. Apparently, he is responsible for radicalising boys into what people are calling extreme misogyny. Ella Whelan, where are you on all this?
I think that it's really irresponsible to try and confuse the issue of violence against women with these headline-grabbing statements on people like Andrew Tate. We know that the vast majority of cases of violence against women, and sadly, a lot of them that end in deaths, are in a domestic violence setting with repeated abuse from partners, who are known to the people. It's not teenagers looking at horrible rubbish on the internet that is causing the vast majority of this violence. So to try and, I think, really cover up or avoid blame for what is police inadequacy by making big statements about Andrew Tate is irresponsible. We know that that's something that could drastically change the numbers of women that suffer from violence at the hands of partners is by proper police work, of following up complaints, of treating women with respect, of, all the rest of it. It's just the boring, everyday, adequate policing. So that makes me really angry. But I do think there is a conversation to be had about inceldom, this idea, and Andrew Tate, and this sort of weird rise of the internet and the influence of the internet on, particularly on young men, whether it's porn or anything else, and the sort of crisis of masculinity. All of that is a thing that I think we should be talking about with kids, with young people. But the idea that if you suddenly banned Andrew Tate off YouTube, or blocked young people's access to the internet, violence against women would disappear is a nonsense. I think it's a really lazy and easy way out of a very complicated issue.
Jack?
Well, look, it's hard to disagree with anything you said. I mean, I think the first thing is Andrew Tate is a vile, horrible individual who has abhorrent views. But parents, I think, also have to accept that if we don't... I've got 3 kids. I know loads of viewers will have their own children. If we don't talk to our own children about things like the views of Andrew Tate, then he is going to be educating them for us on our behalf. And as a parent, I find that absolutely terrifying.
What views of his do you dislike so much? Well, I don't know him, by the way, so you say he's an awful person. I don't know him, so...
Well, the fact that he's referred to women as inherently idle. He said that women are the possession of men. He said that when women get married, they become the possession of their husband, and the husband should be completely free to abuse them in any way that he wants. I think he's a self-proclaimed misogynist. I think they are vile, abhorrent and completely unacceptable views in any modern society.
But isn't it, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because I do confess I am not an avid follower of Andrew Tate, but isn't he someone that kind of longs for a return to how society once was, i.e. that men were the breadwinner, that women were staying at home to raise a family, and that they did rely on their husband to provide for them, that they didn't go out to work? Isn't that what he's trying to create?
Well,
I ask that as an innocent question.
Michelle, just like the Taliban, he has a similar view about women as the Taliban have. And let's not forget that he has also been charged with a series, not yet gone to trial, very serious sexual offences in Romania, and is awaiting trial for the exploitation and people trafficking of women.
Obviously, I've got to say, he's not here to defend himself, of course, and I'm sure he would push back against a lot of what's just been said. Ella?
Well, I think it's a bit futile to try and psychologically unpick him. He's a bit like a male Katie Hopkins. He's an attention seeker. He's one of these influencers that says shocking things. Well, there's some nobody kid from Luton who's decided to make his name by smoking cigars and doing ridiculous things on the internet. Actually, there's been some really interesting interviews with young men who watch his videos, and a lot of them say, all the women's stuff, yeah, I know that's silly. I'm not interested in that. I'm friends with girls, and I know that they're not meant to, their life's work isn't to make me a sandwich. But the thing that they're interested in is sort of his celebrity, his fame, his big cars, and, the sort of stupid stuff that teenagers are interested in. So I think we're giving him too much influence by panicking too much about him, and instead we actually, there are some very serious things that we could be talking about in relation to men and women's relationship, women's freedom. I'm open to those conversations, but we fail if we become obsessed with Andrew Tate.
Let me quickly bring some stats in. This violence against women and girls. Apparently there's 2 million victims every year. There's 2.3 million perpetrators every year. 20% of all police-recorded crimes are linked to violence against women and girls. They reckon that the fastest-growing groups of victims and perpetrators are aged 16 to 19. There's a few things I just want to throw out there. So one of the issues that I've got about this is the lack of data. We don't seem to really understand who are perpetrating these crimes. Often, when we start trying to track, a lot of police forces, when they start trying to track the sex of the individual, because I bet my bottom dollar it's men doing this, you can track the data however this person decides to identify. So this person could decide to identify as a female. That goes down as female on female crime. And you mentioned the Taliban. I cannot help but notice that we do seem to have a habit of importing quite a lot of people into this country who perhaps do see someone like myself, a woman, as lower than and less than them. And that is their culture. What do you think to that?
Well, I think you make a really good point. The fact that people can self-identify as whatever they want when they're talking to a police officer is just the nonsense of society, and I think people do want to push back against that.
But you guys introduced self-ID.
No, we didn't.
I thought it was pushed under people like Theresa May.
No, it wasn't introduced by us. In fact, we pushed back against self-ID. It was introduced in Scotland. The SNP tried to do it, and we pushed back against that really severely.
Previous to that, I'm talking about.
You were big fans.
The important thing to remember about him, and I think what we've got to be really concerned about as parents and people who care about young people, is all the things he's pushing is 30 supercars, smoking cigars, being a multi-millionaire. That is a Trojan horse to appeal to young men, and I'm the only man on the panel to appeal to young men, then to use that to become a trusted source for them to then get their views on women. And that's why we should be concerned about it. And what I say is, Where are the parents in this? Because as I said at the start, if you are not educating your children about reasonable views on women and girls, Andrew Tate is doing it for you.
But what about my other issue then? That we are importing a lot of men into this society who culturally do not see women as equals. Why is no one addressing that issue?
Well, look, that is the problem of multiculturalism. I believe, like Suella Braverman, it has a lot of failings about it. People who come to the UK should assimilate into our society.
Yeah, but they don't.
And take on the views of the UK.
Yeah, but they're not. That's my issue. No one seems to be talking. We can sit here and say they should, but they're not.
Well, I mean, I think it would be quite good to find out what we do think about women's freedom as a society, because there's lots of members of, for example, the Conservative Party who, not for a second suggesting they hold similar views to Islamists, but I would disagree vehemently with their view of women's position in society, what a woman's role should be, legal freedoms that women might have, whether it's around abortion or anything else. So an open discussion about, if Andrew Tate does nothing else other than provoke an open discussion about women's freedom, women's standing in society, whether it's in relation to violence or
not one, but not two,
but
three female prime ministers from the Conservative Party.
All three of them did absolutely nothing beneficial for the furtherment of women's freedom. I mean, you know, just being a woman and wearing a skirt doesn't make you useful to me.
Well, anyway, these days, I was just about to make a witty comment then about self-ID, but I've decided I don't want to stress myself out. So, look, coming up after the break, I love this story. Do you remember those Just Stop Oil protesters that got sentenced to 5 years and 4 years? Well, get this, an open letter has been written out by 1,200 people, lovers, celebrities, saying it's inhumane and demanding a meeting with the Attorney General about this sentence. I also want to touch upon digital IDs. They are coming. Your thoughts?
Evening. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. For many, it's dry overnight and it'll be another fine day tomorrow with some good spells of sunshine. Later on, though, cloud and rain, which is lurking behind me, will start to spread in to parts of the west. We've seen a few showers around today. They're fading now this evening, so generally it's a dry night, bit of mist and fog here and there, but most areas just staying clear and staying quite mild as well. Quite a warm night in the south. Temperatures holding up in the teens here, a little lower across Scotland and northern England, but generally a fine start to Wednesday. Some cloud, but many areas starting off with a bit of sunshine, and much of northern Scotland will stay fine and sunny through the day. Some of the highest temperatures likely on the Moray Firth through the afternoon. Across Northern Ireland, generally a dry and a bright start, but we are going to see the cloud increasing here and start to push in some outbreaks of rain as we go through the morning. Much of England and Wales starting dry, fine with some good spells of sunshine, and a bit of sunshine this time of year soon start to lift those temperatures as well. So as we go through the day, we will see this cloud increasing across the west. There's the rain spreading into Northern Ireland and also further east, Lincolnshire down towards Cambridgeshire, across Norfolk, Suffolk. One or two possibly heavy showers are possible through the middle part of the day, but many areas staying dry until this rain creeps into West Wales, Cornwall, the Isles of Scilly, maybe southwest Scotland later on, as well as turning damp across Northern Ireland. With the cloud and the rain in the west, a little cooler than today, but further east, a little warmer than today. 26 or 27. The showery rain will continue to spread in. We will see some heavier bursts through Wednesday evening across Scotland. That tends to pull away during Thursday, and then down to the south a different day with some heavier bursts of rain coming in across southern counties of England during Thursday. Some lively showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but in between Northern England, parts of Wales, generally dry. Everywhere a touch cooler on Thursday.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays on the M6 in Cheshire. One lane's closed northbound at junction 18. The entry slip road is also shut onto the A54, the Middlewich exit, of course, where emergency services remain at the scene of an accident. Long delays on the M60 in Greater Manchester continue, heading anti-clockwise after an earlier crash between junction 11 and 10. The Barton exit round to the turn-off for the Trafford Centre. In Gloucestershire, just west of Gloucester, the A48 is closed between the Hyneham roundabout and Minstworth following a serious two-vehicle collision. West London, the High Street at Harlesden blocked by an accident. East London, Silvertown Way at Canning Town is shut for accident investigation work. And onto public transport, there are severe delays on the Elizabeth line out of London Paddington to Heathrow and Reading following a 40 train at Southall. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Michelle Dewberry. Till 7 o'clock alongside me, my panel remains the former Tory MP and Chairman Sir Dewberry and the columnist and author Ella Whelan. Welcome back, everybody. Gavin says, Michelle, this Women and Girls thing, please don't label it the Tate effect. It just plays right into what he wants, more infamy. Ike says, Michelle, I really hope that Tate takes legal action on all of these people that are blaming it on him. Graham says, really? Everyone's just going to take the easy way out of laying this at the door of Andrew Tate. Nobody seems to want to make the connection to the mass immigration that's coming into the country. I tried to make the connection. Thank you very much. You can keep your thoughts coming in, but get this. Remember that case of the Just Stop Oil protesters? They were sentenced, wasn't they, to 5 years and 4 years. Well, now, more than 1,200 artists, athletes, celebrities, you name it, they've written this open letter to the Attorney General. They demand, I quote, an urgent meeting to discuss these sentences. They reckon it was inhumane. What do you think to this, Jake?
I think actions have consequences, Michelle, and all of these individuals, it wasn't their first attempt, it wasn't their second, it wasn't their third. In fact, it was their fourth offence, and they had been repeatedly warned that if they did this over and over again, they would have a custodial sentence. So it's not like they weren't warned. And also, let's look at the disruption that they caused. Their blockading of the M25 cost over £1.1 million in policing, cost £700,000 to the economy. That's not even the worst bit of it. A patient who had an aggressive form of cancer missed his hospital diagnosis by 2 months because he couldn't get to his hospital appointments. People miss weddings, funerals, flights. Look, these people, they believe in what they say, that's fine. But if they're going to go beyond the law to disrupt our lives, actions has consequences, and the law applies to all of us equally. I think the sentences were right.
You say that one of them just had a few previous convictions. Actually, one of them had 11. The one that was sentenced to the highest, about 5 years, he had 11 previous convictions. Ella, your thoughts?
I don't have any sympathy for Just Stop Oil or Extinction Rebellion or their politics, but I think their sentencing was wrong, and that's because I care very deeply about the freedom of protest. And I think, Jake, you've just given a good example of where the issues lie. You talked about disruption to people's lives. Any effective protest must be disruptive. Otherwise, there's no point in doing it. And, whether it's the farmers that paraded through Westminster, bringing all the traffic to a near standstill the other day on an issue almost directly opposite to Extinction Rebellion, or, there were truckers who stopped parts of motorways in favour of Article 50, invoking Article 50 around the Brexit issue. Remember that way back then? There are lots of various issues that could be hampered if crackdowns on protests are allowed to continue. You think we have to keep some space between the issue, which is these climate activists, very arrogant, very sort of extremist, talking about the world burning, lighting on fire. I have no sympathy with them at all. I completely disagree with them. And the abstract idea of the freedom to protest. And if you look at the kind of legislation that's been brought in under the previous government, crackdowns on what kind of protest can be allowed, what constitutes a noisy protest, increased police powers for cracking down on protest, all of that is bad news for those of us who might find ourselves in a situation, maybe under a Labour government, vehemently disagreeing with an immigration policy, or, what happens if Keir Starmer, God forbid, decides that he wants to go full rejoiner and tries to bring us back into the European Union? I want to be able to go out on the streets with my fellow citizens and protest that without fear of being put in jail for 5 years.
Every single week. Every single week. I mean, that's the thing is, the first thing is they protest on national infrastructure, and in the law, and this goes back a very long way, the government has drawn a line that if you disrupt airports, motorways, major pieces of national infrastructure, you have to be treated more harshly because that grinds the whole country to a halt. So they picked the biggest bits of national infrastructure to protest on, and they were doing it every single week. Look, if they want to walk on Wimbledon and throw their orange bits of paper out, it's just annoying and the tennis gets delayed. That's not quite the same as grinding the economy to a halt, making people miss hospital appointments, stopping people going to work on national infrastructure.
I think that there's always a fine line and an intricate line to be drawn on a case-by-case basis between what's protest and what's public nuisance. And Just Stop Oil have continuously crossed that line. And I'm not suggesting that there should be no consequences, But I think what happened within this case was there was a big sort of deal made out of the fact that they dared to disrupt. And I think that blurring of the line
that's
between
not true. I've read all of the sentencing remarks for all of these people that were sentenced. It wasn't that they dared to disrupt. This was a collection of people who had backdrops of multiple previous convictions, up to 11 for the first guy. He was out on bail, essentially. Well, in fact, they were all out on bails. They breached injunctions. They showed no contrition whatsoever. They used their trial as a way of direct action process, direct action. They weren't sorry at all. And it wasn't just that they disrupted. It's that they conspired to create absolute, complete gridlock. They wanted to bring the whole motorway system to a stop. That would have prevented law and order in this country. It would have prevented food supply in this country. There has to be limits. And actually, the maximum sentence that these guys could have got is 10 years. They got 5 years. Half of that they're going to serve in prison. The rest of it they will serve on licence. It is reflective as well of the fact that they want to take into consideration not just the harm that they caused, but the harm that they intended to cause. Personally, if I could find that judge and shake his hand and pat his back and give him a high five, I would. We disagree. What do you think to it at home? We'll perhaps continue the conversation, but I know Ella's passionate about this too, want to talk to you about the introduction of digital IDs. Good idea or slippery slope?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Football and gambling can go hand in hand and cause long-term problems. New figures show that young adults aged between 16 and 24 who have bet over the last year are more likely to report mental health issues compared to those in older age groups.
And joining us now to discuss this is Matt Burgess, who is a former gambling addict and now helps those to deal with their own gambling issues.
Yeah, look, I think gambling is one of those things that is so accessible now. You know, everyone's got a kind of mobile phone in their pocket, walks around with a kind of 24-hour casino, if you like. So I think it's really important that people realise that we have to sort of recognise that that is a month of quite condensed gambling, and we don't want people to sort of carry that on into their everyday life, because that's when it can become really risky and you know, it could become addictive.
I had no idea, though, that it was linked to first-time gambling. For the first time, people might be able to pick up and have a go. And then it doesn't end there. It goes on, because by then you've got the bug. Is that how it works?
You've got to remember, for things like the Euros, the World Cup, so you get a lot more people watching football and therefore potentially betting on football.
May I ask you about how severe your own gambling addiction got?
Well, look, I think there was a couple of touch points for me where I realised that things were getting out of hand. There were some times at university where, you know, I kind of thought, you know, I'm definitely doing this a bit too much, but, you know, kind of thought maybe it would move on once I left, but it didn't. It did follow me. And then, you know, I got to points where I was at my worst gambling 16, 17 hours a day. I was spending huge amounts of money. It can spiral out of control very, very quickly, and that was the important thing that we want to highlight is, you know, what can start as fun can become very, very dangerous in a sense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said storm. You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tomorrow from 6, the legends of breakfast television are back together. Eamon Holmes and Anne Diamond, only on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Ella Whelan and Jake Berry remain alongside me. Jake just made a good point, I've got to say, in the break, talking about those Just Stop Oil people. We live in a democracy. If you feel so passionate about a cause, stand yourself up for election then and try and affect change that way, rather than being, I'm adding this last bit, absolutely idiotic in some of your actions. Anyway, look, let's talk about digital ID. This is a conversation that's got many of you talking at home. We have now this Digital Information and Smart Data Bill, and people, the Labour Party is selling this as a good thing, that people can start to have digital IDs to make access to services more easier. Kay says on Twitter, we must resist digital ID. It's the first step for government control. They work for us, and I do not comply to be controlled via a digital ID. It's the first stop, she says, to things like central bank digital currencies and social credit system. Where are you on it, Ella?
Yeah, I'm very against this. To be honest, my rule of thumb is anything that Tony Blair was a big fan of, I am not a big fan of. And he has been behind the push for digital ID for very long, or some form of sort of moving towards a papers, please society for a long time. And let's be frank, digital ID would turn us into a digital papers, please society. And it's just not in our nature in this country to be like that. And that's the first thing. But the second thing is, you know, the Labour Party says this isn't going to be mandatory. They say you'd still be able to have paper access, blah, blah, blah. Will that be an assurance in law? We have to wait to see, because just saying that it will be fine doesn't cut it. The state is not benign. It's not to be trusted as sort of like a nice auntie looking over you. But if you look back to, for example, when truancy was a big issue in the news, and we were talking about kids skipping school. Michael Gove and previous government made a suggestion somewhere. What about if you docked parents' benefits whose kids were playing truant?
Yeah.
Which I think is a very, very bad idea.
And a lot of people would agree with that.
Fine. But if you had a digital ID, there would be no debate. The government could do it like that, because they would have access to everything. And so it's a very dangerous suggestion for people who particularly on the lower end of the economic scale, who have something to lose from state intervention. So I'm completely against
So that is a no from Ella Whelan. Jake, your thoughts?
I do not trust the government to have our data. We've already had a hack of your NHS records where health tests and the most personal information about you were leaked online by hackers.
But you literally wear the government.
But I'm a freedom fighter. This is state control. That's why I opposed some of the, in fact, many of the later COVID measures, I opposed those. This is state control. It is a creepy plan from Tony Blair to track you from cradle to grave. It is part of a global agenda, effectively to bring everyone under the same legal system on the planet. I completely oppose it. Be very, very afraid of this. Do not support it. Do not sign up for the digital ID. It is a bad idea. You will come to regret it. And this idea that they can put in law that it will be voluntary, of course they will do. Laws can and will be changed. If this comes in, everyone will be forced to have it.
Viewer Glenn says, Michelle, we all must resist digital ID. He says it's a precursor to a cashless society. We will end up with medical records digitised and then a social credit system, which is all about total control. He says anyone in favour of it should ask themselves, do you want to become like China? He says the flip side of this is that John says, what's everybody's issue? We have to show ID when we go to vote now. No one seems to be crying about that. Tracy said, I used to live... Yeah, Ella did. Tracy said, I used to live in Malta for 12 years and I had ID cards there. There was no issue. It's a great idea. She says it would also help to find them thousands of missing migrants that have seemed to have disappeared. So she gets the cheers, she says, for that as well. Many of you still getting in touch about the Bibi Stockholm suggesting that homeless people would literally jump at the chance to be housed on there, suggesting that as a potential future use. And I've got to say, there's not a huge amount of sympathy for the Just Stop Oil Brigade and their sentences there. Some of you saying that they should have had much more sentence. You're a harsh bunch. Look, that's all I've got time for. Ella, Jake, thank you for your company. Thank you for yours at home as well. I'll be back tomorrow, but up next, it's Nigel. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Thanks for joining me for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. For many, it's dry overnight and it'll be another fine day tomorrow with some good spells of sunshine. Later on, though, cloud and rain, which is lurking behind me, will start to spread in to parts of the west. We've seen a few showers around today. They're fading now this evening, so generally it's a dry night, bit of mist and fog here and there, but most areas just staying clear and staying quite mild as well. Quite a warm night in the south. Temperatures holding up in the teens here, a little lower across Scotland and northern England, but generally a fine start to Wednesday. Some cloud, but many areas starting off with a bit of sunshine, and much of northern Scotland will stay fine and sunny through the day. Some of the highest temperatures likely on the Murray Firth through the afternoon. Across Northern Ireland, generally a dry and a bright start, but we are going to see the cloud increasing here and start to push in some outbreaks of rain as we go through the morning. Much of England and Wales starting dry, fine with some good spells of sunshine, and a bit of sunshine this time of year soon start to lift those temperatures as well. So as we go through the day, we will see this cloud increasing across the west. There's the rain spreading into Northern Ireland and also further east, Lincolnshire down towards Cambridgeshire, across Norfolk, Suffolk. One or two possibly heavy showers are possible through the middle part of the day, but many areas staying dry until this rain creeps into West Wales, Cornwall, the Isles of Scilly, and maybe southwest Scotland later on, as well as turning damp across Northern Ireland. With the cloud and the rain in the west, a little cooler than today, but further east a little warmer than today, 26 or 27. The showery rain will continue to spread in. We will see some heavier bursts through Wednesday evening across Scotland. That tends to pull away during Thursday, and then down to the south a different day with some heavier bursts of rain coming in across southern counties of England during Thursday. Some lively showers for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but in between Northern England, parts of Wales, generally dry. Everywhere a touch cooler on Thursday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Heading south of Glasgow down the M74, the exit slip road is partly blocked. Junction 1A, the Polmaddy exit, where a lorry's broken down. On Merseyside on the M53, northbound a lane is closed. At Junction 5, the eastern tunnel for a car's broken down. And on the M56 in Greater Manchester, a lane shut eastbound Junction 5 to 4 between the Manchester Airport turnoff and Wythenshawe following a collision. On the M1 in Leicestershire, the inside lane shut southbound just after Junction 24, the East Midlands Airport turnoff, a lorry's broken down. West London, the High Street at Harleston still closed following an accident. On the M26 in Kent, the outside lane